Do the Marlins go with Avisail Garcia in the DH spot? Does he even make this roster? We're carrying on this conversation, talking about the outfield, third base, and the rotation. A lot of Jesus Luzardo noise and chatter. Does he get the ball opening day for the Marlins? This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. It's your daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Miami Marlins _UK. Make sure you get those follows in urgently. Marlins Twitter madness will be kicking off real soon. Real soon. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen. This is your team every day, even on a Saturday. Yes, sir. Saturday, the 30th of December. We are almost into 2024. There is a YouTube channel as well, guys. Make sure you hit subscribe over there too. That is also called Locked On Marlins. Welcome back again. Chase, how we doing, brother?
Right in early, Pete. It was cold last night, man. It got into the low 50s. I don't know what that is Celsius to you, but experiencing your winter. This LMF pack's coming in handy, though.
It's back.
Years. It's great.
Back, baby. It's back.
Thanks for having me again. 2 days in a row.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to start the conversation. Well, we're going to carry on the conversation. For those that listened to yesterday's episode, and that should be every single one of you, we were going through the Fangraphs roster resource projection for the Marlins opening day roster, working through our sense of what could happen, who's maybe on the bubble at this point. I'd say, we probably spent 10 minutes talking about shortstop, and I'm not convinced we know exactly how things are going to play out. It's a very difficult one, but a fun conversation nevertheless. So, what have we got on deck today? Third base, outfield, DH, and the rotation. If we have time for the bullpen, we will touch on it. But the bullpen, boy, oh boy, that's probably another 7 episodes on its own, the way Peter Bendix has been adding relievers this offseason. So, before we get into third base, which will probably be brief, this episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, and I emphasize the word new, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And we are starting with third base. Right now, roster resource rightly has Jake Burger slotted in there, not Gene Segura. It's a big upgrade for the Marlins heading into 24. Chase, one question on Jake Burger. We know he is going to make this roster, obviously. We know he has a chance to be an all-star in 2024. But the question I have for you is, do we see Jake Burger spending all of his time at third base defensively? I think that's the one question I have for him. Or could there be some time maybe DHing? Where's your head at on that one?
He'll be our starting third baseman at least 90% of the games, 95%. That includes some off days in there.
Mm-hmm.
He may play a DH spot. You don't want to take his bat out of the lineup if you don't have to. We'll get into DH, which is going to be a longer discussion. But he's our everyday third baseman. He's taking the offseason to improve, as most do. He's working out. Ashland's awesome, like you see her videos and whatnot. His wife Ashland, of course, on Instagram and whatnot. I like Jake Burger. I like him at third. I don't get why he gets all this hate saying he's a bad defender or whatnot. He's a third baseman. I think he made a couple errors on our team. Look, the guy played injured. He played with heart. He's our third baseman, and that's that. And I don't want to hear anything else.
I completely agree, by the way. I saw the scouting report was not sure about the third base defense. There's going to be a ton of strikeout, not much contact. I didn't see any of those things. Third base was fine. And he hit pretty much 300, give or take, for the Marlins in his stint there. And the strikeouts dropped away. Scouting report was false. Well, primarily because he was playing in with the White Sox. And it was just a dumpster fire. and sometimes the situation drags you down. Jake Berger came alive in Miami, and looking forward to him playing third base. Yeah, Chase, I'm with you on the 90%, by the way.
25 home runs in the first half before the trade deadline last season. That's going to take place, or hopefully take the place of the 26 home runs of Soler before August 1st last year. So technically you're only minus 1 home run. I know I'll get beat up for saying that, but you have that power all year on this team. He's much better than Segura. You have an actual third baseman for the first time starting on this roster in so many years. You're not going from a Wendell to a declining Brian Anderson, Isaac's MVP, but we have a good, strong third baseman on this roster for the first time in a long time. And it's something that we should be celebrating, and I'm happy about it.
I'm with you. I've already said it. I said in the intro here, talking about it. For me, Jake Berger is going to be firmly in the all-star conversation this year. And he's flying under the radar a touch at this point because, listen, there's a lot of good third basemen around, obviously. But Jake Berger, for me in the NL, I can see him having a real nice year for the Marlins for sure. So, yeah, looking forward to it. Let's keep it rolling. Let's get into the outfield. There's a lot to get into from an outfield perspective. Let me just start with, well, my laptop's having a bad minute, but the one I wanted to briefly touch on is Jazz Chisholm Jr. He will be playing center field, right?
Jazz will be the starting, hopefully a healthy Jazz will be the starting center fielder for at least 150 games next season. That's, again, going with some off days. We hope Jazz, we need him for a full season so we can hit up your tracker of 2020.
Let's go. 40-40, mate.
40-40 tracker, sorry. And you can do it, and we need it. We need that power. We need Jazz healthy, and he's a all-star. If he's healthy, he's an all-star. And if he's healthy, he's a Gold Glove contender next season.
Mate, I'm with you. I can see, I mean, I've said this many times, but I can see a monster campaign from Jazz Chisholm Jr. in 24. Whether it's going to be 8 WAR, who knows? But I can just see a monster season. I'm really excited to see. And if you can get 150 plus out of Jazz, then look out. It's going to be stunning. Talk to me about Brian De La Cruz and Jesus Sanchez, actually. Do you know what? These guys are kind of in the same boat for me where, you know, they had a full year last year. It was like Jesus Sanchez showed progression. He was definitely on the roster bubble for me at one point last year, heading into the year. Like De La Cruz ended the season before really hot. There was a lot of hype, actually, I'd say, with De La Cruz. In some ways, Jesus Sanchez progressed more, and maybe De La Cruz kind of took a step backwards. But nevertheless, these are 2 guys, young guys. You expect them both to be on this roster at least for opening day.
DLC is a great outfielder. He is the RBI leader of 2023. It wasn't Jorge Soler, your home run machine. It was Brian De La Cruz, who was clutch in bringing in runs after the 7th inning. I'm talking bottom or top of 8th, bottom or top of the 9th inning, bringing in RBIs to help us in those 1-run wins last season. That's something that we didn't have in 2022, but 23 we had. Sanchez, he needs to hit left-handed pitching. That's his downfall. He's progressed in everything, but he struggles against left-handed pitching, and that's rough. However, I expect them both, as constructed right now, they will both be the corner outfielders on this team come opening day. And we're going to get into our DH, and that has a lot to do with why I think.
The other guy that's projected on the roster right now is Peter Bendix. Do you see a spot for Peter Bendix here on the opening day roster?
Love Peyton. My face just said it all, though. He couldn't hit. He struggled. Had over, I think, 50% strikeouts in his 2 weeks up in the majors. Look, there was no need for Jonathan Davis. Bendix was brought up to fill the role when Jazz got injured of the extra outfielder. He didn't show he could stay up. 55% strikeouts. I hope he improves on that.
Way too much.
That's his downfall. And I don't see a place for him on this roster unless that improves and you see it in spring. Although he did have a hot spring. It's so different. He was crushing it in AAA before he was brought up. Came up, went cold, went back down to AAA, and crushed it again. Sometimes Major League pitching is just too hard to hit, and it's such a difference between AAA and the majors. Look, I like Peyton. He's the one who took my chain last year. He asked me for it. He's the one that made the home run chain a home run celebration. So him and I talk on Instagram. He's a good dude. Unfortunately, last season he couldn't do it. If he is that fourth outfielder, yes, I like it. Bring him in. If he can hit.
I think so. We've got Jazz nailed on. We've got DLC. We've got Jesus Sanchez. In theory, Jesus Sanchez can slide over to center field if required. Let's not forget that he spent a ton of time in center field a few years back. Avisail Garcia, let's talk about him, who is actually slated to be the DH via roster resource. However, obviously, he spent most of his time in the outfield, predominantly in right field for the Marlins, although sometime in left field, like he kind of moved around a touch last year. But Avisail Garcia, he remains on the roster. Many people thinking his Marlins career was over. He has not been DFA'd. He has not been released. He remains on the roster. He has to be on the roster unless a deal is done or a transaction is made. You got feel here, Chase. Give me like out of 10 being he's nailed on and he's starting, and 1 being he's DFA'd. What's your likelihood of him being on this roster opening day?
I didn't read this FanGraph projection thing before we discussed it today and yesterday. I had made my projections of the starting lineup with him as your DH. It just makes sense. We don't like it as fans from the last 2 years. He's supposed to be a big bat. I think he had, three or 5 home runs last season. I forget which. It was just very low in home runs. Take the pressure off him being in the field. If you're bringing Burdick in as your fourth outfielder, the only position that's left is DH for a guy you're paying $12 to $14 million next season. They are not paying him that money to ride the bench as a cheerleader, folks. If he's on this roster, which I fully expect him to be on this roster, because this ownership does not want to waste that money, he will be the opening day DH. And if they bring up a Troy Johnston, that's who he's competing against for the DH. Or Bell, he gets in that conversation. If Berger's at third and you don't bring in another position player for third, which we just went over, you don't need, then Avisail Garcia, and you got to root for him. Let's send that positivity now. He will be your DH batting 9.
Batting 9?
That's no, sorry. He'll be batting 8th. I see Betancourt or Fortes batting 9th every game.
Oh man, I love that. I mean, the optics of this, right? Avisail Garcia, one of the most expensive contracts on the roster. He's in the DH spot, which should be one of the biggest run producers. Imagine having your DH batting 9th.
The most expensive position player contract ever given out is to Avisail Garcia. I'm not talking Stanton. I'm talking actually legit. All right, free agent.
Yeah,
he was the most expensive free agent. Ever. First most expensive free agent we've ever signed to a long-term deal, and it blew up in their face quick. It didn't happen just last season. He claimed injury and overweight the year before and out of shape. He came back in shape last season, had no power, was injured, came back. I think his best game was the game he came back from injury. He went 3 for 4 and then went right back to 0 for 19. So you hope he comes into spring. I just look if Bendix could work magic and get him off this roster where we're not paying, kind of like Kim Ng did with Segura, take on another player. You and I discussed this last season. It's just a long discussion, right? It doesn't have to be this long. He's on this team. If he's on this team, he's your DH, and you live and die with him.
Boy. Listen, Jorge Soler is still out there. JD Martinez is still out there. Framil Reyes is out there for some. Like, there's DH options out there if they wanted to pay anyone. I'm not convinced they want to pay anyone at this point. Like, I feel like the budget is already stretched or busted, to be honest with you. And so I feel like the majority of acquisitions may come via trade, but I'm not sure how many there will be. But nevertheless, from between now and opening day, you still see the Marlins looking to swing a sort of deal to acquire a power stick. And the byproduct would be that maybe Avisail Garcia is just more of a platoon bat rather than a starting DH type of guy.
If they make a move. And I don't see them making many, if any, moves.
No.
I get called out on Twitter. You probably see it as a homer, as that fan who doesn't see any negativity. No, I see everything. I just don't spew negativity. I'm going to be encouraging and root for the team to be successful. But if you're looking at it from what they're doing, they're not spending the money. They know 2024 is not a season like 2023. You're not going to have a season. Look at what the Dodgers are doing. They're going to be better. The Padres are not going to play as bad. Maybe the Mets stay in fourth place and we finish third again. But we're not competing for this division. We're not competing. We're maybe competing for a wild card, but if you look at what Arizona just did, they got better. The Cubs, they haven't made their moves yet. The Giants, they have made a few moves, especially signing that one player from overseas, the 5-year deal. If you look at where the Marlins are, we don't have our ace, who may never pitch for this team again. Go back in history to some episodes. You discussed it. I discussed it on previously with you. This team is not competing for a World Series next season. They may not compete for a World Series for the next 12 years, not because they don't want to, but the Dodgers have a guy making $2 million for the next 10 years that should be making $70 million over that same time period. So the Dodgers are in it to win it. The Braves aren't getting any younger. They basically signed everybody on their roster for the next 8 years, including Acuna, who's making less than Ozuna. It's just crazy, but the Braves did it. And unless they change up Major League Baseball in 2026, when the CBA is up again, unless they redo divisions and redo everything, this team's you're going to have a team that want to compete for 500, but they're not competing for a World Series for the next couple of years. It's just not. You can get hot. MLB can shoot themselves in the foot by having this break for the first and second place teams. But overall, sticking with 2024, this team is not competing, and you got to set your expectations for what you thought they would have been last year, which is 78 wins. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but
no, I think it feels.
Somebody else in. I don't see that this year was. We discussed in yesterday's episode. This year is a growth from the front office aspect to set your team up to compete every year, to kind of get the pieces in place, the analytics in place for you to get the younger guys in. But from a starting lineup perspective, it's going to be very difficult for them to bring in anybody off free agency right now who's going to make a big difference.
Let's move it over to the rotation, because I think this is where we get the sense that a big move could be made. And it's one that is more of an organization builder rather than an all-in move for 2024. You know, it feels like the brief for these guys is, let's come in, we need to draft better, we need to develop better, but we also need to retool the farm. And to do that, you have to maybe make some decisions around your most valuable pieces if you really want to supercharge the farm. That seems to be the message that's coming out. Let's talk about the rotation. Sandy Alcantara will not be pitching in 2024. Jesus Luzardo is projected, I think, as the number one at this point. His name has been bandied around a lot. There was some reports, I think, from Ken Rosenthal about Luzardo to the Royals that was kind of being mooted. Like, the Marlins are having conversations about Luzardo. I think it's pretty clear that is happening. With that being said, do you expect Luzardo to be the opening day starter for the Marlins in 24?
That's tough. The fan in me says, I like the hometown kid. I think they not sell him, but sell based on him. Like, actually put some marketing behind it. You know, he could bring some fans in every fifth day if they did it right. However, he's going to be making $9+ million based on his arbitration number, and that's just going to go up. He had his best year in 2023 after being injured in every other season he's been in the majors.
Yep.
From a business standpoint, and it's the Rays' way of thinking, from a business standpoint, now's the time to sell him. And you could get the best for him right now. It's not going to happen as he loses years. It's not going to happen as he gets more expensive. And that's only going to hurt your roster. You have enough pitching, as long as they're healthy, to make up for it. Am I saying they're on Luzardo's level? No. But you have enough to get you by. If healthy, you have Yuri, you have Braxton. Trevor Rogers healthy. You have Eddie Cabrera, if he can get control over his head, which means less balls, less walks. You have Max. Did I say Max Mayer already? But you got Max Mayer returning. You have that other tall guy, Dak Fulton. Is it Fulton in there? Plus the little Meyer. He's going to come up in the next couple of years. You got, if Sandy comes back in 2025, Luzardo, you got to, if you can, I don't want that one player who they talked about from the Royals. I'm sorry, I don't have the name off my head. It's that low that it's not a move that would have been like, wow, they really did well for themselves on a 1-for-1. I don't see, I want to. I don't see him on this roster. Being that they've made no other moves yet, and have 1 month left before pitchers and catchers report, 6 weeks. I think their Fan Fest is on the 26th as we record this on the 30th. So you only have 28 days until the Fan Fest.
Yep.
If they're going to make a move, it's a big move. What's your thoughts?
Spoke about it a lot, to be honest with you. His value is at its highest at this point. So it's the right time. If you can swing the right deal, then, you go with it. I look at it and think the thing that kind of not nags to me, but the way I see things is the progression where you think about, okay, we had Starling Marte, an expiring deal that we then managed to flip to get Jesus Luzardo. And we sprinkled some dust on him. And if you can then convert 2 months of Starling Marte with a playoff appearance and a stunning season of Jesus Luzardo into a franchise supercharging deal with 3-4 guys that are going to really add to your farm that are near-ish, then I think it's worth consideration. And that's the thing is with this, if they do a deal, I just get the sense that it will be a kind of Yelich-y type deal, which for me, considering I spent about 45 minutes listing out a load of prospects on Twitter earlier on, and the risk is so high. I get it, why we want talent in the organization to develop and whatever, but we see it. I've just seen it with my own eyes. I go through the full list and I look at these guys that were ultra hyped, we got excited about, and they were turds at the big league level. For me, I'm in that kind of LA Rams methodology from back in the day of like, F them prospects, F them picks. Like, I want the talent on the big league field. I don't really care what's in single A, to be honest with you. Like, I get the idea, but as a fan, I want the big league product to be nailed on. And so for me, I'd love to keep Luzardo and to restock the farm. To what end? To what end? There's other ways to restock your big league team. You don't have to just be a prospect conveyor belt, but That's my rant on it anyway, mate.
I agree with everything you just said there, but if you look at who made that Yelich trade from a Jeter standpoint, who Yelich basically took all the leverage out of the Marlins' hands when he said, I want to be dealt. I don't want to play for this team anymore. They got what best was available on the Brewers at the time. It just didn't pan out. However, you got a guy who's been doing this for the better part of 20 years in Peter Bendix, somewhere on the Rays roster, on the Rays back office or front office. Maybe he can swing the deal that makes that difference. And I agree, you don't want to hear about the guys in single A or double A, but if they could come up in a year or two and really supercharge this team, if you get a Jacob Amaya times 50, not saying him, but someone better than him, and you swung that for 2 months of Starling Marte over after all, I can see how it makes sense. Again, business standpoint, not fan standpoint. Fan standpoint is I want the major league roster to be good. I want fans at the ballpark. But business standpoint says your team won 84 games last season, and quite frankly, they were over 500 for more than 3/4 of the season. Come down the stretch, they were only under 500 once when they went to Tampa and then swept Tampa to go back over 500 after May. Didn't change. Fans still didn't come out. It doesn't matter who we bring in or don't. The fans prove they don't come out to games. And that's a shame on Miami. I think slandering fans. And don't tell me, we need long-term winning. Look, you were in a playoff chase for the first time with fans in 20 years. You're going to tell me you're not going to show up to cheer on that team? They didn't. So
no, they didn't. It was underwhelming. It was underwhelming from a fan base, but it takes longer maybe. Right. And the problem is to get people to buy into this new methodology, it's a tough sell in theory. What you're saying is we're not going to really look to build on the year that we've just had. We're actually going to maybe take a step backwards because we want to build for 2028 or something. And listen, that's a lot of time in baseball. But going back to it though, Peter Bendix, at this point, if Jesus Luzardo is dealt, he's looking to recreate and maybe even supercharge the Chris Archer deal. When you look at deals with pitchers like that Chris Archer for the Rays to the Pirates, where you go and get Tyler Glasnow, they got Shane Baz, and they got the outfielder that's gone to the Tigers now. I forgot his name, but I could probably look it up. Either way, it was an absolute landslide of a deal. And that's kind of what they're looking to achieve is if they can find a landslide deal, but it's so risky, but you have to maybe trust this front office because that's where they've invested the time. Let's kind of go through the rotation briefly right now just to finish up because we're running pretty long on time here.
It's a
Luzardo, yeah, exactly. Luzardo, I think it's 50-50 that he's going to be on the roster for opening day. Yuri Perez is going to be on the roster. We know that. Braxton Garrett, in my opinion, will be on the roster. I don't see him being moved unless, again, the control levels, the cost of Braxton Garrett, the business side says you're not going to move Brax unless it's a crazy, crazy offer. And frankly, you're not going to get a crazy offer for Braxton Garrett because the skill set and the stuff does not equate to that type of package. He had a great year, but can he repeat it again? My gut feel is he's going to regress. Nevertheless, talk to me about Trevor Rogers because the Marlins have missed him for the last couple of seasons. He struggled to stay on the field. Is Trevor Rogers going to be healthy coming out of spring and be in this rotation?
Yeah, he's going to start in the rotation at least. It's going to be a battle between him and Max Meyer. It's going to be that fifth starter.
Okay, let's finish it up then because we're at 30 minutes. Gut feel, who's going to be in the pen of those two?
Oh, out of those two?
Or obviously Max Meyer could be in AAA. There's no reason why he couldn't be.
Yeah. I think Trevor Rogers over those two makes the opening day rotation just because he has the history of being there. And Max is coming off Tommy John. You want to get him kind of started off in AAA going before he's brought into the Lions.
The thing is, as well, if Luzardo is dealt, then actually everyone slides up anyway, right? Where you got Yuri, Brax, Eddie Cabrera, Trevor Rogers, and you need Max Meyer. Is he healthy enough? Don't know. You've got Ryan Weathers. He could be a guy to step up. You've also got, Smeltz is back in the organization too. Like, there are some guys that could step up, but I think you make a great point on Max Meyer. If he's healthy, if he's fit, if he can, take a full body of work straight away, then through spring, he's going to be fighting for a roster spot. I'm not sure of his timeline, to be honest with you, and whether that's feasible for him. If it is, then I'm excited to see what we can see from Max Meyer. I wasn't overly blown away by his big league debut, to be honest with you. I kind of watched very intently, and it didn't look like Yuri Perez, to be honest with you. It looked a couple of levels down in terms of the stuff. I still feel like he's just a two-pitch guy and relies heavily on the slider. It looks like he just needs a little bit more development at this point to be a true kind of 3 or 2 in a rotation. But, you never know. He may end up being just a really good bullpen piece. So we'll wait and see. We're going to wrap it up there because we're over 31 now. So I appreciate everyone tuning in on Saturday. Hope you've enjoyed this episode, this bonus episode on a Saturday. And of course, I appreciate Chase for joining me over 2 episodes to dig into this roster. But as you can tell, we've spent an hour digging into it. Felt like we could have got another 30 minutes at least. There's a lot of decisions that could be made, a lot that will be made. And frankly, the Marlins offseason hasn't really fully started yet. I'm excited to see where it goes, to be honest with you. But nevertheless, I appreciate you for making Locked On Marlins your first listen. Look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow on New Year's Eve, where, of course, there will be a Locked On Marlins. And I appreciate Chase. And don't forget the new handle for Chase as well, at Loud Miami Fan. Make sure you hit him up there on Twitter as well.
Happy New Year, Peter. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, guys. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow, New Year's Eve. Let's bring this new year in with a bang. See you then, guys.